Good day and welcome to the Time is Right for Automation webinar. Today's webinar is being recorded. At this time, I would like to turn the conference over to Roger Hellman. Please go ahead, sir.
Great. Thanks very much. And I want to thank all of you for joining this webinar, The Time is Right for Automation. I want to extend a welcome to everybody. I think we've got a really good session for you. We're going to talk about getting ready for the new normal. We're going to talk about benefits of server automation. We're going to talk about high value add use cases and a lot more. So I think we've got a really good session for you. So we'll just get rolling. Again, I just want to welcome everybody, but it's not just me welcoming you. There's actually 3 presenters today. So I'd like to introduce them right now. There you can see that's me, Roger Hellman. I work in marketing at BMC. I've been working in security and automation now for about 10 years. And what I'll be covering is an overview of our solution, just to give everybody the background. And I'll cover some key use cases, and I'll cover the server automation maturity model, which actually could be kind of a fun exercise. After that, Cody Dean is going to speak, and Cody is super smart. He's a senior solutions engineer. I'm always nice to Cody because I think someday I might be working for him. But what Cody's going to do is he's going to go to the next level of detail, and he's going to talk about the technical capabilities of our solution, the problems that it can solve, and he's also going to show you and talk about some new features that you may not be aware of that you might want to take advantage of. So that's what Cody's going to talk about. Then after Cody comes Bob Hayward. I think some of you may know Bob. He's a great guy. Bob works for BMC, but he works in our internal IT organization. So he's got a lot of good practical hands-on experience. He's going to talk about how BMC uses server automation internally, and he's going to share some of his insights, some of his experience, and I think you'll be really happy with what he shares as well. So hopefully we've got something for everybody. We're hoping that we cover the waterfront here. Okay, so here's our agenda. We've talked a lot about this already. The key use cases, the maturity model, implementations inside of BMC, and we'll close with a discussion and a Q&A. But you know, when you put together one of these webinars, you do it with a certain objective in mind. You do it with a purpose. And our objective today is really simple. We're hearing that from a lot of you that, you know, given all that's happening in the world today, budgets and resources are tightening up. That makes maximizing efficiency more important than ever. So our goal today, in addition to the items that you see here, is to check in with you and help make sure that you're using server automation as effectively as possible and you're getting the maximum benefit out of the solution. Okay, so first just a little summary of the challenges that we all face, and I've got 4 of them here. The first one is patching. Patching takes too long. If you look at industry data, on average, it takes about 84 days to patch a new vulnerability, yet the hackers are ready to exploit in only 30 days. So that creates a 54-day window of vulnerability. That's too long. We need to shrink that number, and we can do it using automation. And one of the reasons that it takes so long to patch is because of the large number of vulnerabilities that are out there. I look at the Department of Commerce data, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and what they say is in 2019, there were over 16,000 new vulnerabilities. And I actually tracked the trend here. It was about the same number in 2018 and in 2017. So things really are not getting better. Part of the problem is that there's a gap between security and operations, so that makes handling these vulnerabilities even more difficult. Patching and making the config changes needed is labor intensive, so that's a challenge. and it's hard to find people with the skills needed to do this work. Security is in short supply. Another key challenge is the public cloud and securing it. I think almost all of you are using the public cloud, and misconfigured resources are the #1 cause of security failures. And last but not least is compliance and configuration management. I think almost all of us have to comply with certain regulations, whether it's HIPAA, Sarbanes-Oxley, PCI, or whatever, or it could be internal policies. And on top of that, configuration changes and configuration drift is a problem due to unauthorized changes perhaps, and that can affect performance and availability. So a lot of challenges out there, but what we want to do is we want to get you to the desired state. And the desired state is where there's a lot of automation in place. So if you have server automation today, what I would encourage you to do is expand its usage and cover as many of these use cases as possible. You've already got the solution in place. You've already paid for it. So expanding its use to multiple use cases should come at minimal cost. Meanwhile, the benefit could be very big. It could be orders of magnitude, in fact, bigger than what you're experiencing. On top of that, the other thing that I would recommend as part of the desired state is to have a look at automating change management within these use cases and across these use cases, because automating change management can dramatically cut the amount of time and the amount of labor needed to execute a task. So that's the key set of use cases and the desired state that I wanted to talk about today. Okay, now we're going to have some fun. This is the server automation maturity model. So as I walk through this slide, what I would ask you to do is think about where on this continuum does your organization land? And I'll explain that further, but just think about, am I maybe at level 1 or level 3, level 4, or what? So let's explain the graph, starting in the lower left. In the lower left, that's a state where tasks are performed manually. There's no automation in place. As we move on the horizontal axis to the right, we increase the amount of automation. So we go from manual to maybe domain automation, and going further to the right, now we're automating across the enterprise. The vertical axis is business value, so how much value you're getting from automation. So let's talk about level 1 to begin with, the ad hoc level. And in fact, really, let's combine that with level 2, which is initial automation. In both of these cases, we see, like I said, things are done manually. Maybe spreadsheets are being used, maybe scripts are being used, maybe emails are being shared. But in these two levels, organizations really just can't keep up with the demands being placed on them. They fall behind with respect to patching, configuration management, security. They're at risk of failing compliance audits. One thing that we do recommend at these stages is, at a minimum, use discovery. Because even though you don't have any automation in place, you need to understand the IT assets you have and the business services that depend on them. But what we like to see is people advance to level 3, the intermediate automation level. And I think a lot of you who have server automation are likely to be at this stage. But it can also vary by use case. So maybe, for example, for compliance, you're at level 3, but maybe at configuration management, you're at level 2. But just overall, think about where you are on this continuum. But as I said earlier, we recommend that you maximize your use of automation across multiple use cases, and also include cloud security. So this is an important phase. Just to give you an idea of the results you can achieve at level 3, We've got one customer who is using server automation for compliance, and they have oh, sorry, does someone have something to say? Okay, must be an echo. At level 3, we've got a customer, for example, who has used automation to automate their compliance and their reporting, and they've taken report generation time down from 32 hours to 15 minutes. So just an example of the benefit you can achieve at level 3. Advancing to level 4, what we see is, customers have extended their use of automation further, and they're now using process automation, advanced analytics. One good example here is vulnerability management. And so customers are using it to ingest scanner information, augment it with data from discovery, identify blind spots, and then use the analytics in the automation to analyze the vulnerabilities, map them to the assets, map them to the patches or configuration changes needed for remediation, set priorities, and then use automation to deploy the fix. We've got one customer, just another example, who's at level 4, who's saving about $4 million a year because they've done the things I just described. They've automated cross use cases, and they've adopted advanced automation tools like vulnerability management. Now, level 5 is really where we would like to see customers go, because here's where you're maximizing the benefits of automation. And what's happening in level 5 is we've got process orchestration, and automation is being used in a proactive way. I'll give you an example. We have one customer who's achieved level 5, and what they're doing is they're automating multiple use cases. They've also incorporated automated change management, and they've integrated with ITSM. So they've got a true end-to-end automation solution in place. In fact, what they can do is they can patch in 1/14 the time that it took when they used manual methods. And that's important because in the area of security, speed is critical. Time favors the attacker, not the defender. So what you want to do is patch as quickly as possible and in the most efficient way. Okay, so I went through the bottle. Now I'd like to turn it over to Jerry. And what Jerry's going to do is invite you to take part in a voluntary and anonymous poll, so we can see where you folks believe you are on this continuum. So, Jerry?
We're going to go ahead and open up the poll now. You'll see it on the right-hand side of your screen now. Just go ahead and choose your response and click Submit.
Okay, folks, and just a couple of things while you're doing that. Again, there are no wrong answers here. Everybody falls somewhere on the spectrum. In fact, just an interesting little story. When we were preparing for this webinar, me and Bob and Cody came across a piece of research, and it was a survey of IT professionals, and it asked them the same question that I'm asking you. They said, okay, where do you think you are on the adoption of automation? And 98% of them said, well, it's a continuous effort, and they described, the number of projects they had underway, et cetera, projects they had in plan for the future. But there were 2% who said, we're done automating. We don't have any more automation to do. And we kind of smiled at that because, we said automation is kind of like owning a home. You're never done. You finish one project, you've got another project after that, and another project after that. And each time you finish a project, you're happy with the result, and you want to move on to the next one. So, again, there's no wrong answers here, but the more of you who participate in this, the more interesting I think the poll result will be. So, Jerry, how are we doing? Do the folks need more time, or do you have something that we could talk about?
I would say maybe just a little more time. We got some folks still taking the poll.
Okay, that's fine. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to the next slide, and I think you probably all have a pretty good idea of level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But I want to show some of the other things that we have learned at BMC about server automation adoption. Many organizations do not maximize the benefits of automation. They approach it in a tactical way instead of a strategic way. We recommend a strategic way, cross use cases, and move up the continuum. The other thing is just keep in mind is advancing to higher maturity levels is a missed opportunity. So we encourage you to advance upwards. And it's also a virtuous cycle. As you, kind of like my analogy about owning a home, as your maturity level increases, quality of service increases, costs go down, and so you want to continue with further adoption of automation. So if this is interesting to you, we at BMC would welcome the opportunity to talk about it more. Contact your BMC salesperson, and I think they'd be happy to have a really good discussion with you. If you're not a BMC customer, we have a takeaway, a brochure at the end of this presentation that you could use to further get an idea of where you are on the adoption of automation. So, Jerry, how are we doing?
We have our results, and I'll go and display them now.
Oh, fantastic. What I'll do is I'll go backwards. So we have a lot of people. It's pretty much what we thought we'd end up with. A lot of people in the middle, with some level 1s and 2s and some 4s and 5s. So a lot of customers who have server automation and are using it are at level 3. So this is not a huge surprise, but very interesting result. I want to thank everybody for taking part and sharing this with us. So I thought, this would be a cool thing to do. I hope you found it to be interesting and a little bit of fun, maybe spice things up some. Now what I'd like to do is turn it over to Cody.
Thank you, Roger. So BMC in itself is going through sort of a transformation. We're starting to move more and more of our solutions to a SaaS offering or a more webified offering. So if you're a traditional TrueSight server automation customer, you're probably used to the client server type thing where you have a console that's installed on your workstation. We have the BMC Helix platform that we've had for a few years now, and we're migrating a lot of that components and bringing in new functionality to that Helix platform. So the first thing we have, we're going to talk about a couple of them today, 2 of them being the BMC Helix Remediate platform, and inside of the Remediate platform, we have the Helix Automation Console. The Helix Automation Console brings together high-level, really popular use cases for the server automation platform into a very easy to use, easy to leverage, get adoption, web-based console. So we'll talk about both of these more in a moment, but essentially what it's doing is bringing the patching and vulnerability component to a web-based level for you to leverage for maybe your lower level administrators. The second component is Helix Cloud Security. So traditionally we've been strong in the space of doing OS level compliance, patching, configuration management. As you move to the cloud, the number of those configurations grow exponentially, and we'll talk about that more in a minute too. But the second component within that Helix Remediate platform is that cloud security platform. So the first thing we're going to do is kind of take a moment to talk about what is the Helix Automation Console. So the Helix Automation Console, the first component in it is something that you may be traditionally referred to as the TrueSight Vulnerability Management Console. So the ability to consume and tie together your vulnerability management process with your operations process. We took and put that into a unified platform with vulnerability management as well as patching, and give you that ability to get the accountability and the dashboarding and the functionality from a centralized platform. So vulnerability management, ingesting those security scans from your organization's security team. So you're not having to do the, pass the CSV file over the wall and have somebody go out there and figure out what the vulnerability is, how do I fix it, and then ultimately go fix it in a manual fashion. It ties together your operations and your security team. I like to say that it builds a bridge. It builds that bridge between your security and your operations team. The second part, which is very closely aligned to vulnerability management, is patch management. So not all patches have vulnerabilities associated with them, and not all vulnerabilities have patches associated with them, but in the large majority, they do. So vendors are, going out there issuing patches to fix their systems, and a large number of the vulnerabilities are like things like OS or application level vulnerabilities. So we pulled together in this platform a patching platform that takes a policy-based approach. So the traditional patch process was check for patches and then schedule your remediation for those patches. We took an approach of setting up a patch policy that continuously on a schedule checks for what patches are needed. So much like you scan, you may scan your environment security on. I think somebody, so I just heard an echo. But traditionally you would do your security scans on, say, a weekly basis. And those security scans would be utilized to remediate vulnerabilities. We take that same approach for patching now with the TrueSight Automation Council. So what we do is we set up a schedule, say we want to check for available patches on a weekly basis, and then we have that content, that information available and ready to be able to take that remediation action when the time comes. The next thing is we take that information from both patch and vulnerability management and roll it up into a dashboard view that lets you do things like configure SLAs around critical patches, critical severity vulnerabilities, and make sure that they're getting addressed in a timely fashion. Track and report on the trends. So if you have, say your operations teams are being really proactive or being really reactive, and they're taking the initiative to get stuff fixed quickly, but it's sitting and waiting approval or waiting execution for X number of days after the operations teams take action, you can see that and figure out where those slowdowns are in your overall process. The final part is utilizing our discovery software to be able to do blind spot detection. So you can't secure what you don't know, and you can't secure what you don't have under your management. So the blind spot detection takes the discovery data from BMC Helix Discovery and allows you to integrate that with the data that's presented in your operations tool and in your scan results and figure out where you may have blind spots in your organization. Really, together, the BMC Helix Automation Council, the goal is to bring your automation closer to that level 5 intelligence that we talked about in the maturity model. So the next piece, so as I mentioned earlier, the TrueSight server automation historically has been very strong at doing compliance, configuration management, patching for those OS level CIs that you have in your environment. But as you start moving stuff to Azure, AWS, or even containerized environments, the number of configurations that you have grow tenfold. So instead of having, security or security groups or security policies or users groups, things like that you have on a traditional operating system, you also have network security groups and permissions to the container or to the cloud device itself, and you have to be able to secure and maintain those, or you risk exposing your organization to something like a public security breach where you have an S3 bucket that's open to the internet. So what we do is in BMC Helix Cloud Security, we provide a policy library that allows you to go in there and easily implement out-of-the-box content to your cloud configurations with the click of a button and be able to quickly identify and remediate those findings. So we provide out-of-the-box content, but we also give you a policy sandbox to be able to go in there and create operational compliance if you want, allowing you to enable your DevOps or your developers to go in there and do the more innovative things, but not being the hindrance of that innovation. So setting up guardrails so they can go in there and create resources, deploy things, but making sure you're doing it without exposing your organization to additional risk. So the next thing, so we can find, but we can also fix. So automatic remediation of those findings, much like we do in the server automation side. So finding and fixing, so using the APIs to go out there and do things like close that S3 bucket as soon as it opens in your environment. So you're minimizing the risk to your organization at all costs. So an example, I keep using that S3 bucket because that's a big thing. It's really easy for an administrator to go out there, create a new storage bucket and accidentally leave it open or purposely leave it open, not realizing the risk that that exposes your organization to when it comes to data leaks. So being able to do things like that and have it shut down, but tie it into your ITSM and your change management process. Application-centric, so being able to provide this as a visibility and accountability tool to your application teams by leveraging Helix Discovery and those service models and those application models that exist within there to see your cloud security at an application level across cloud providers. So, oh, I didn't change the slide, sorry. That's what I'm talking about here. The application-centric, so being able to, if you have a HR application that exists within Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, on-prem even, being able to look at the overall security of that based on your application model preferences. So we have the TrueSight Automation Council and we have the Helix Cloud Security System. How do those tie together to bring you closer to that level 5 maturity when it comes to automation? So, you know, it's often pretty difficult to start tying together on-premise and cloud, and how do I approach it at a security aspect? How do I do compliance consistently? With the TrueSight Automation Council plus BMC Helix Cloud Security, we can do that. We can give you the OS level compliance, we can give you the cloud configuration compliance, and we can allow you to make sure that your organization is at little risk as possible when it comes to migrating or moving your organization to a more cloud-centric foundation. One of the things that we did that's new to the server automation side is implement the idea of a smart hub, because traditionally you had to manage the agents for those server automation environments. You had to figure out how am I going to get the RSCD agents out? Am I going to use the agentless management push and do that type of thing? Am I going to bake it into my images? So what we allow you to do is deploy a smart hub now that will manage those cloud environments and manage the compute in those cloud environments. So like the EC2 instances, making sure that those have the agents on them so you're doing that OS level compliance. And how it does that is when a new EC2 instance is stood up, it registers back with the smart hub, which is tied into your server automation environment. And when the new EC2 instance gets stood up, it registers it back to server automation, and then it goes and pushes the security configurations along with the agent configurations to those EC2 instances. So you have that under management. You have those under your control, much like you would a traditional on-prem server, but in your cloud environment. So one thing to keep in mind, and some organizations often overlook, is the fact that a server is a server. It doesn't matter where it lives. It could be in an Azure instance. It could be in AWS. It could be on-prem. That OS, that Windows Server 2000, is still going to be a 2016 OS. Doesn't matter where it lives. If you have your infrastructure created correctly, you can manage those in a consistent fashion. The way we help with cloud security is to ensure that those configurations and those agents are pushed to those EC2 instances. So from your cloud security tool, you can quickly and easily see, yes, I'm compliant and I'm secure at both an operating system level as well as a cloud configuration level. So you get that overall picture. Again, pushing you towards that level 5 automation, so you're not having to worry about micromanaging those new EC2 or those new cloud compute instances that exist out there. So with that being said, just BMC, these are a couple of examples of how BMC is kind of reinventing itself and becoming more of a leader and partner to helping you become as automated as possible and help you get that maturity level that you strive for. So The next thing I want to do is talk with Bob. So we have Bob from Internal IT here at BMC. Bob, how is BMC using these internal tools to help climb that ladder to the security automation maturity model? Can you give us some insight on that?
Thanks, Cody. I threw up my video just for this first introduction part, and I'm going to take it off of video because I'm so proud. This is the longest I've had my hair since I retired from the Air Force 20 years ago. So thanks for joining today and giving us this opportunity to give you some of the thoughts from our internal IT organization. My name's Bob Hayward, and I'm part of what we call Customer Zero. We're an internal team that leverages BMC portfolio to run what we hope to be an effective and efficient IT organization. So to that point, I wanted to talk just a little bit, and I'm taking the video off because I don't want you to see me too much. I'll be kind to you. When Cody talked, what I heard from Cody is the technologies are there, they're available, they work. And just to validate that, I would say that I see the same thing internally. The technology does what it needs to do to allow us to move forward and be successful and move up this maturity level. What I wanted to share today was some of my thoughts or our thoughts on the transformation journey and how to get you from ad hoc to mature, or as Roger stated, getting from that current state to a desired state. For me, it comes down to just a few things: where to start, how to get others to believe in you and believe in the approach, and get adoption. Gather some of the believers together. And then finally, for me, and I usually say this not in such a nice way, but I'll be kind today since it's being recorded, do something. Move forward today. Do something today that you discussed yesterday. Let's not discuss it again tomorrow. Let's get something done. Unfortunately, the adoption effort and proving the value of a true transformation can provide, often it's provided by a crisis situation, that extended service outage, or maybe even one of those dreaded troubleshooting calls that goes on forever. When I first joined BMC, this was all too familiar for me. And what we used was trying to figure out how to make ourselves better. We started and we did some configuration management, started understanding what it was that we were delivering to the business, what the capability or the service we're providing is. And then we started to show people what was in it for them. And the vision was kind of, I'd say, owning your off-duty time to really experience a work-life balance. Sorry, that off-duty time's a little flashback to military days. But having a work-life balance and actually being able to finish a round of golf before you get called into a crisis call, stuff like that. And what people realize that is if you put a little effort in up front, the payoff on the back end is so sweet. You start being able to have dinner with your family. You don't get on these crazy calls. Now, by now you're thinking, okay, Bob, this sounds great. However, there's a lot of fear of change in an organization. To be perfectly clear, trying to reconfigure or tightening something down that's in a production environment becomes a challenge. If it works, people don't want to mess with it. People don't want to make it more compliant. They don't want to do configuration drift. It's working, don't touch it. And I agree to a point, but that's where I kind of recommend doing a few things to get there then. And if I'm advancing the slide. Okay, this is what I call stop the bleeding. Build and deploy some of these new devices based on corporate governance standards. Stop putting stuff into production that becomes another thing on that list of things to fix. What this did for us and what it can do for you is it allows you to have that controlled, consistent deployments. It helps identify the services that might require an exception to a configuration or a compliance, regulatory compliance rule. And it will begin to instill that confidence in your configuration standards and in your compliance standards with people that when they put their application on, guess what? It actually still works. We're not talking about taking on the world at the beginning. We're talking about doing things that kind of everyone agree on. So what I say is even in your production environments, tackle the obvious rules first. What I like about TrueSight automation for servers is the ability to go out and see where I'm at without doing anything yet. And unlike certain people in my organization, they're always telling me what's wrong and what I need to fix. TrueSight server automation will bring that back to me, and I know I'm a little weird, and those of you that know me know that. And I kind of hear this little voice in my back of my ear saying, hey, Bob, this stuff is not quite right. Would you like me to fix it? That ability to actually fix something through an automation process instead of just adding to a list of things that you would like to get to is truly the value of this approach. And it lets you start understanding and driving your configuration standards. So what I'm saying here is if you look at, let's take a regulatory, something like CIS compliance, there's about 80% of those rules that nobody's going to argue with, disabling this guest account, those types of things. There's about this 80% that I call the green stuff, the stuff that you can go after, you can see where you're sitting, and you can make an intelligent decision to let's get these compliant. Then you get into that 15%. Now this is where if you're a typical IT dude, you're going, yep, here we go. It's that 15% where now you need to look at an application's configuration, or maybe if we change this compliance rule, is the app still going to work? That 15%, you're pretty much going to have to work side by side with your application support teams, if your organization is similar to ours, and identify, is this something I can fix, or is this something I need an exception for? It's a little bit more work. And then finally, there's that 5% that's just flat out hard work. I'm not going to tell you there's a magic bullet for this stuff. That's where you, quite frankly, I joke about it. I say, that's where you put a security guy, an application guy, and an infrastructure guy into a room, and whoever comes out with the least amount of blood wins the battle. So you're either going to end up with a compliance rule that can be enforced, or you're going to have a well-understood exception to your compliance rules or your configuration rules because you spent the time to walk through it and be sure of what you're doing before you do it. Now, let's be frank. By the time you get to that 5%, you're so much better off than most of us are today that you've made a lot of progress and you've had an opportunity to establish an approach for this and make things a little bit better. It's not about being perfect. It's about getting it better than it was yesterday and moving yourself forward. And finally, for those that put the work in to get some of this governance standards into your environment, don't lose it when you go start moving workloads to the cloud. You put a lot of work in to establish standards. You put a lot of work in to stop that bleeding and get things built better and keep things under control. Bring that with you to the cloud, and that's where Helix, the cloud security pieces, come in. When you're putting that stuff into the cloud, let's put it out there in a secure and configuration compliant way that you really never start bleeding. And it's a good opportunity to make those changes as you move forward. And that's where the compliance for Helix Cloud Security comes into play. This is going to help you make sure you do that. And remember, we're talking about leveraging compliance rules that are already available within the tool set. You're not having to build and make up this content. You're actually using the content that I call in the box, and the tool actually will do this for you. And again, you can see it, you can understand it, and then you can automate the compliance if it makes sense for you. Now, just to recap a little bit on some of the things I talked about, maybe a few choice words. One thing I always tell folks is don't ever let a crisis go unleveraged. Use that opportunity to prove the value and drive additional support for adoption. When it's hitting the proverbial fan, people are wanting to hear an answer. If you're ready and understand how these things work, you're the guy that can come into that call, maybe leverage Blade to look at the difference between two servers in a pool. Maybe you're having an intermittent problem. You can take a look at these things, and you can drive that call to actually identify hey, this pool member's got this patch level, this pool member's got this patch level. One, how did we get out of the consistency? But two, how do we get them to be the same again? And how do we make sure when we deploy new things that they go in consistently, built the same way with the same rules, and then stay consistent as you go across. And then again, one more time, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Do the best you can with what you have today. It's going to be better than what you had yesterday. And what you're going to do is you're going to prove a value and then improve on that value. It doesn't have to be perfect to be good. Then last thing for me, this is my one sales pitch. I am an internal IT guy, but I work for a company that sells software. So this is my one sales pitch. I really believe that the thing that BMC brings to the table, if we're here as a partner. We're not really that vendor approach of selling. We want you to, and that's what this call is about today. What do you have today? How can you leverage it? How can you get more value out of what we've already sold you? There's no money on the table there for me anyway. Let us help you be successful. There's a great ecosystem at BMC today, and that includes making ourselves, BMC internal IT folks, available to have these IT, one-on-one IT to IT discussions and talk through what are your challenges today and how do you get by with them. Now, one thing you guys may have noticed a little bit today, I didn't talk a lot about product because I firmly believe that the technologies that we all have available to us today are there, they work, they'll do what they need to do. It's really getting organized correctly, getting people to believe in it, and getting people to make adoptions, even if it's at small steps. So for me, that's about all I really wanted to share today. If there's any discussion, I'll hand it back over to Roger to follow up from here. Roger, back to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bob. I always like hearing somebody who tells it like it is, and so I really appreciate your insights. I think the audience did too. Okay, Bob mentioned we want to help, and that's absolutely what we want to do. So here's a couple of places you can go to get more help. First of all, the BMC server automation community. I suspect that many of you are members. If you're not a member, I would encourage you to join. It's very easy. It gives you the opportunity to network with your peers, share information, and just learn more about the solution. In addition, if you go to the server automation documentation page, a lot of good stuff there. I've crawled through it many times. I always learn something, and it describes server automation itself, and it goes beyond server automation and talks about things like I mentioned earlier, things like automating change management, and that can be very, very beneficial. So I'd encourage you to check out these two resources. Also, we have, as Bob mentioned, we're not here to sell you anything. What we want to do is check in with you and just make sure that you're maximizing your use of the product and taking advantages of the efficiencies that it delivers. So online we have a shortened version of the server automation maturity model self-assessment. That's especially, I think, useful for folks who are not BMC customers. Have a look at it. Again, like I said earlier, if you are a BMC customer, talk to your salesperson and engage with them and make sure that you're using this solution to the utmost. In addition, we have a free trial of the BMC Helix Cloud Security offering. Cody talked a lot about that, as did Bob. What we've done here is we have extended the free trial to 30 days. It used to be 2 weeks, now it's 30 days. So again, we want you to, just make sure that you're securing the cloud the way it needs to be secured. Okay, so with that, I'd like to open it up to questions and answers and have a discussion. So the lines are open for questions. Actually, I saw one. There are a few that came in that I thought were really interesting. They're all good, and we will follow up on all of them. But just in case we run out of time, one that I'd like to cover is, and Cody, maybe you could take this one. what will be the future of the specialist?
Yeah. So in the chat area, there was a lot of really interesting discussion around that. So obviously, as you shift from concerns with organizations is, okay, what do I do with the people that are sitting there performing the operations actions today? And the answer for that we see in the industry as we help customers through this maturity model, administrators sitting there maybe logging into servers and patching, they're helping and contributing with the patch automation. So they become more from a system engineer to more of an automation engineer. Most of them already have a background. They're used to dealing with the systems that you're wanting to automate. So leverage that expertise and create that into a role that they can then transition into to support the automation effort and basically make them bring more value from their role and just contribute more to the discussion. So that's what we see internally. That's what we've seen with customers. Prior to coming with BMC, I was with a customer, and that was kind of the transition that we had. I was a server administrator that transitioned into an automation engineer myself. So we see that transformation on a day-to-day basis. So it's not something you have to be concerned with losing FTEs when you start automating. It's just transitioning them into a role that brings more value to your organization.
Hey, Cody, if I can just elaborate on that just a tad for internally here. I usually pick on different groups of people, but I'll be nice today. So Unix folks have been doing automation for years. And what I found when we started looking for opportunities to improve was the Unix folks already had a lot of good scripts. They were already doing a lot of good things. The only issue was that nobody knew what was going on or when it was happening. So instead of starting from scratch and building these things in a different tool, what we did is we simply accepted what they were doing, validated it, and then kind of took we took the TrueSight orchestration and rolled it around what they were doing, where we were actually opening a ticket in ITSM and documenting what was going on and seeing how often it happens and taking advantage of their previous work, but just making it more of an enterprise-ready solution. So there's a lot of good stuff going on in all our organizations already. You don't have to throw that away. Just pick up on it and make it a little bit more of an enterprise solution by maybe laying some orchestration around it and really understanding not just what you're doing, but how often and is there a bigger problem maybe hiding behind there.
Okay, great. Another question. Now all customers are hosting their servers in the cloud. So what's the plan to manage those servers using server automation? That's the first part of the question. And then it said, do we have to host TrueSight servers in-house or on premises? So I wonder, Cody, could you answer that one?
Sure. So I should probably make it more clear. So when I talk the Helix Automation Council, when I say, so BMC has two different product sets that are in parallel. So we have the Helix products, and we provide to you as a service. We still have the TrueSight product set, and those are traditionally hosted on-prem. You know, they're hosted by the organization. The Helix Remediate is you still have to tie into that on-premise automation environment to do things like reach your servers, allow you to manage your patch content, things like that. So you can very well, so with the Server Automation Council, you can manage systems. I was talking around the how do we tie the two together. Server automation is managing servers. A server, you can host that environment wherever you want. It's a matter of just making sure that you keep that in mind when you develop or sure your architecture for that server automation environment into something that could, securely and efficiently reach into those cloud providers. And that If you reach out to, the BMC, your salesperson or just somebody at BMC, we can have that talk and let you know how we would recommend you.
And Cody, this is Jerry. Just wanted to jump in there real quick. We're hearing your audio cut out. Just wanted to check and see if we can have our operator check your audio line. Ian, are you on the audio?
Hi there, yes. So it seems Cody is still connected.
So Jerry, as we
can try. My apologies. If you'd like to reconnect, we can try to do that.
And Roger, was that you jumping in?
No, that was Bob. So
okay.
I was looking at one of the other things on here that I think warrants some more discussion. So it kind of around how do you get people to buy in? How do you get your organization to invest and not just expect everything to be a magic button, right? To be honest with you, what I find when I speak with customers, and I don't speak, I speak with them, not at them most of the time. But what we find is and it was true with us too, you have a group of people that really get it, whether you're an organization of 1,000 and you have a couple hundred or 50 people, or if you're an organization like us, about 400, at the beginning you end up with a group of true believers that believe doing and approaching this from what I call discovery to recovery, and using that approach to leverage what I have the entire portfolio to drive the right effective and efficient operations. It's sometimes you end up doing other people's work for a bit until they get it. So I'm not saying that's right, but sometimes being the guy that can step up and help somebody when they're in a jam. So for example, we had one of them pen tests done by a third party, and this was several years back, so don't worry. We had a number of vulnerabilities against some of our network devices, and the team was just really tripping out on how are they going to actually accomplish all this. Well, I can guarantee you at least one guy, me, was running around for years telling them, hey, we got this, you should try this, you should try this. Well, when it really came down to it, they were in a jam and they needed to correct these vulnerabilities. And when we stepped in and said, listen, we got this product called TrueSight Automation of Networks that can take this and fix it across all 500 of those devices. You can test it here, you can do it here, it'll back up the current thing, it'll, if it goes wrong, you can redeploy it with back it out. And when we really showed them that, they were amazed. And they were like, wow, that's amazing. And I said, yeah, what the really neat part is? I know the company that built it. So sometimes it's waiting for something like that to come along that you understand what you should be doing with your products, or maybe your processes or your tools, your organization, maybe configuration management, whatever you think. If you're improving it and you're ready for when other people are in a situation where they're willing to listen, and you can come in and help them get out of where they're at, all of a sudden now you got 51 people that believe, maybe 55 people that believe. And you just have to really be there and show the value, because sometimes we keep saying, oh, this is going to be wonderful, this is going to be wonderful. They don't actually get to see it. What if you come in and show them, look, this right here, and they say, oh, that is wonderful. It's not something that they see a vision of being wonderful. It's something that you've helped them with, and it's already a better way. And that's worked for us, is understanding what you're going after, sharing the value. We do things called brag IT to highlight the use cases that we put in place that save a lot of work. And then we aren't really looking to get rid of people. We're reusing those people. So overall, we've come a long way at BMC IT, but it wasn't as easy a journey as you think it might be just because we own the products. We still have to prove value internally, and we still have to get people to buy into it. And the way you do that is you help them look better, give them credit for what's the improvements you're making, and just honestly just help them through what they should already be doing themselves. and as they see the value, they'll start buying in and they'll start asking for more and more and more, and that's how you'll mature. I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, I think it helps a lot, Bob. Thank you. We had a couple other questions that came in, and they were asking about branding and naming, specifically with respect to BMC Helix vulnerability management. One person asked, is it a placeholder for BMC, a portal threat director? Another person said, what is it? And my answer would be, first of all, you can have a look at the web. Just look up BMC Helix vulnerability management. And what you'll find is the capabilities of it are similar to TrueSight vulnerability management. However, it's different in some respects, mainly the deployment model. So what you do with BMC Helix vulnerability management is it resides in the cloud, and it contains capabilities for analyzing and managing vulnerabilities. It has capabilities related to the automation console and also simplified patching. So BMC Helix Vulnerability Management is a separate offering. So I want to make sure that that distinction is made, and I hope that it answers the question. So I'm looking to see, I think we've answered everything in the queue. But folks, if you have more questions, by all means send them in, and we'll get you an answer. And with that, Bob, Cody, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Nothing on my end.
No, I think this was good. The only thing I'd say is for those folks out there that want to have a deeper conversation, whether it be with one of the pre-sales folks, our value engineers, or even IT, internal IT, reach out to your sales team, and they know how to get a hold of us. And no obligation. We're just looking to help you move forward and get value out of the stuff that you've been bought from us, and help you get moving along this maturity level. So please don't be shy and reach out. I'd look forward to talking to you guys if we can help you through some of your organizational stuff, or maybe a process to make this a little bit easier to grow. Good luck with your journey, and again, if you need any help, please reach out to BMC. We're here to help.
Great. Thanks to all of you for attending and participating. I hope this was beneficial. We'll make the content available to you, and just want to say thank you very much for attending and participating. Have a good day.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes today's webinar.